The conference hall buzzed with congratulations and champagne wishes as I stood near the dessert table, watching my family mingle with the crowd. My graduation party had transformed the downtown Boston venue into something that felt both celebratory and surreal. 25 years of my life had led to this moment, a master's degree in environmental engineering and a future that seemed impossibly bright. I adjusted the hem of my emerald dress and smiled at another well-wisher, someone from my father's pharmaceutical company who congratulated me with the rehearsed enthusiasm of corporate obligation. The hall itself was beautiful, all vaulted ceilings and crystal chandeliers, but I kept thinking about how much simpler I had wanted this evening to be. My mother had insisted on the grandeur. She always insisted on grandeur. My father, Gregory, stood near the bar with his business associates, his silver hair perfectly groomed, his posture radiating the confidence of someone who had built an empire from strategic investments and calculated risks. He ran Thornfield Pharmaceuticals with the precision of a surgeon, and he expected that same precision from everyone around him, especially from me. My younger sister, Olivia, was 22 and newly graduated herself, though with a degree in art history that my parents had tolerated rather than celebrated. She wore a champagne-colored dress that caught the light as she moved through the crowd, her blonde hair swept up in an elegant twist. We had been close once, when we were children and the world seemed less complicated. But somewhere along the way, distance had grown between us like ivy creeping up a wall. I caught my mother's eye across the room. Diana was her name, though most people called her by some title or another: Mrs. Gregory, the philanthropist, the socialite. She wore pearls and a fixed smile that never quite reached her eyes. She gestured subtly for me to join her, but I pretended not to notice. I had learned over the years that sometimes the best response to my mother's summons was strategic blindness. The party had been underway for 2 hours. Speeches had been made, toasts had been offered, and the catered salmon had been served on fine china. Everything was proceeding according to plan, which should have been my first warning. In my family, things that proceeded according to plan usually meant someone else was getting hurt. I moved toward the windows overlooking the Boston skyline, needing a moment away from the forced conversations and hollow congratulations. The May evening had settled into that perfect temperature where spring promised summer without quite delivering it. Through the glass, I could see the city lights beginning to sparkle as dusk deepened into night. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from my best friend, Jade, who worked as a financial analyst downtown. "How's the circus?" she had written, followed by a circus tent emoji. I smiled and typed back that the elephants were performing beautifully. Jade knew about my family dynamics. She had been my roommate during undergraduate years and had witnessed enough holiday disasters to understand that the polished exterior of the family concealed something far more complicated. She had once told me that my family reminded her of a museum exhibit, beautiful to look at, but you dared not touch anything. I spotted my father breaking away from his business associates and moving toward my mother near the edge of the dance floor. Something about his posture made me pay attention. He leaned close to her, his hand on her elbow, and I saw her nod slightly. They both glanced toward Olivia, who was chatting with our cousin Benjamin near the entrance. I could not hear what they were saying, but I knew that look. It was the look of conspiracy, of plans being set in motion. My father had worn it when he had restructured his company 3 years ago, laying off 200 employees the week before Christmas. My mother had worn it when she had convinced me to break up with my college boyfriend, claiming he was not ambitious enough for someone of my standing. The music shifted to something slower, and couples moved onto the dance floor. I watched my parents separate, my mother heading toward the powder room and my father returning to his associates. Everything appeared normal, but something felt wrong. It was like watching storm clouds gather on a clear day. You could not quite explain the feeling, but you knew something was coming. I decided to find Olivia. We had barely spoken all evening, which was not unusual, but I suddenly wanted to check on her. As I made my way through the crowd, nodding at guests and accepting more congratulations, I kept replaying the image of my parents' whispered conversation. Before I could reach her, My father's voice boomed through the room as he clinked a knife against his champagne glass. The crowd quieted, turning their attention to him as he stepped into the center of the dance floor. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate my brilliant daughter Ava," he began, his voice carrying the practiced warmth of someone accustomed to public speaking. "Her achievements in environmental engineering represent not just academic excellence, but the kind of innovative thinking that will shape our future." The applause rippled through the room, and I felt my cheeks flush. My father continued speaking, outlining my accomplishments with the kind of detail that made me wonder if he had actually paid attention, or if someone from his staff had prepared his remarks. He mentioned my thesis on sustainable pharmaceutical manufacturing, my internship at a green technology firm, my plans to join a consulting company that specialized in corporate environmental compliance. Everything he said was technically accurate, but it felt hollow. He spoke about my achievements the way he might describe a successful stock portfolio, proud of the returns, but disconnected from the actual substance. I had spent 5 years of my life studying, researching, and learning, and he reduced it to talking points for a dinner party speech. When he finished, more applause erupted. I smiled and raised my glass in acknowledgement, playing my part in the performance. This was what we did in my family. We performed. We pretended that success was measured only in degrees and promotions, in money and status. We never talked about the cost. As the party continued, I found myself drifting back toward the windows. The sky had turned deep purple now, and the city lights created a constellation of artificial stars. I thought about my thesis, about the research I had poured my heart into regarding pharmaceutical waste management and water contamination. My father's company had been one of my case studies, though I had been careful not to highlight their violations too prominently. Even in academic work, family loyalty had its demands. Jade texted again. "Escape plan ready if needed. I'm at Murphy's bar down the street. Emergency exit protocol activated." I smiled. Jade always had my back. We had developed the emergency exit protocol during my sophomore year, when family gatherings became unbearable. She would position herself at a nearby location, ready to provide an excuse for my sudden departure if needed. We had used it twice, once during a particularly brutal Thanksgiving dinner, and once during my grandmother's funeral reception when relatives kept asking about my dating life. I was considering activating the protocol when I noticed my mother approaching my father again. They stood near the entrance to the hall, partially obscured by a decorative pillar. My father leaned down, his mouth close to my mother's ear. I watched her face, trying to read her expression, but she maintained that same fixed smile she had worn all evening. Then I saw something that made my breath catch. My father glanced around the room, checking to see if anyone was watching, before he spoke. I instinctively stepped behind a large floral arrangement, peering through the white roses and green foliage to observe them undetected. His lips moved, and though I could not hear the words, I could read some of them. I had learned this skill years ago, during family dinners where important decisions were made in whispered conversations, while children were expected to focus on their meals. "Tell your daughter," he said, and then something about transfer and stocks and account. My mother nodded, her expression shifting to something calculating. She said something back to him, and he responded with what looked like, "Well, everyone's here," and then pointed subtly toward Olivia, who was now standing alone near the coat check, scrolling through her phone. My stomach tightened. This was not just casual conversation. This was instruction, strategy, execution. Something was happening, something they did not want observed or interrupted. The timing was deliberate, during my graduation party when everyone was distracted and celebratory. I watched as my mother excused herself from my father and made her way across the room toward Olivia. She moved with purpose, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. When she reached Olivia, she leaned close and spoke quietly. Olivia's expression changed from boredom to surprise to something else, something like reluctant understanding. They spoke for perhaps 30 seconds. My mother handed Olivia something small. It looked like a piece of paper, or perhaps a card. Olivia glanced down at it, then back at my mother, then toward my father, who was now deeply engaged in conversation with his associates, his back turned to the rest of the room. Then Olivia moved. She did not say goodbye to anyone. She did not stop to collect a coat, even though the evening air had grown cool. She simply walked toward the exit, her movements quick and deliberate, and disappeared through the doors into the lobby beyond. Something cold settled in my chest. Whatever was happening involved me somehow. My father had said, "Your daughter," to my mother, but he had been looking at Olivia. Which daughter? And what about stocks and transfers and accounts? I thought about my trust fund, the one my grandmother had established when I was born. It was substantial, not enough to retire on, but enough to provide security and options. My grandmother had been a shrewd investor, and she had ensured that her grandchildren would be taken care of after her death. The fund had been set up to transfer to my full control on my 25th birthday, which had been 3 weeks ago. But I had not accessed it yet. My financial advisor had sent me papers to sign, documents to review, instructions for taking full control of the account. I had been so busy with final exams and thesis defense and graduation preparations that I had set them aside, planning to deal with them after the party. Had that been a mistake? I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, navigating to the investment account that housed my trust fund. The page loaded slowly, the spinning icon mocking me with its leisurely rotation. When the numbers finally appeared, I stared at them for a long moment, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The balance was wrong. Not slightly wrong, catastrophically wrong. Instead of the substantial 6-figure sum that should have been there, the account showed barely $5,000. My hands began to shake. I refreshed the page, certain there had been an error. The same number appeared. I checked the transaction history, scrolling through recent activity. There it was, a massive transfer, dated 3 weeks ago, the day after my birthday. The entire trust fund had been moved to another account, one I did not recognize. The room suddenly felt too warm, too crowded, too loud. I needed air. I needed answers. I needed to understand what had just happened and why my sister had quietly left my graduation party at our parents' instruction while my trust fund sat empty. I made my way toward the lobby, dodging well-wishers and trying to maintain the composure expected of me. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Perhaps there had been some kind of legitimate transfer, a consolidation of accounts, or a tax strategy I did not understand. Perhaps my financial advisor had made an error. Perhaps the banking app was glitching. But my father's whispered instructions kept replaying in my mind. While everyone's here. This was not an error. This was intentional. The lobby was quieter than the main hall, the thick carpet and heavy doors muffling the party noise. I spotted the coat check attendant and asked if she had seen a young woman in a champagne-colored dress leaving. She nodded and pointed toward the elevators. "Just a moment ago, miss. She seemed in a hurry." I rushed to the elevators, but the indicator lights showed one had already descended to the ground floor. I jabbed the call button repeatedly, knowing it would not make the elevator arrive faster, but unable to stop myself. When the doors finally opened, I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby, my reflection in the polished brass showing a woman I barely recognized, eyes wide, color high, the careful composure cracking. The elevator descended slowly, and I used the time to text Jade. "Something's wrong. My trust fund is gone. Olivia just left suddenly. Need you." Her response came immediately. "On my way to the building. Meet you in main lobby." The elevator doors opened, and I hurried across the building's main lobby toward the street exit. Through the glass doors, I could see Olivia climbing into a taxi, the door closing behind her before I could reach it. The vehicle pulled away from the curb and disappeared into Boston traffic. I stood on the sidewalk, breathing hard, trying to decide what to do next. I could not return to the party. Not yet. Not until I understood what was happening. But I also could not chase after Olivia without knowing where she was going or what she was doing. Jade appeared from the direction of Murphy's bar, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her expression shifting from casual to concerned as she took in my appearance. She wore jeans and a leather jacket, looking refreshingly real compared to the formal artifice of the party upstairs. "Talk to me," she said, guiding me to a bench near the building entrance. I explained everything, the whispered conversation, the suspicious departure, the empty trust fund account. As I spoke, Jade's expression grew progressively darker. She worked in finance. She understood exactly what this meant. "Your parents transferred your trust fund without your authorization," she said slowly, making sure I understood the full implications. "That's not just unethical, Ava. Depending on how they did it, that could be illegal." "But how could they?" I asked. "I turned 25. The fund was supposed to transfer to my control. They should not have access anymore." Jade pulled out her own phone, fingers flying across the screen. "When's the last time you actually looked at the trust documents? The original paperwork from when your grandmother set it up?" I tried to remember. Years ago, certainly. My grandmother had died when I was 16, and I had been too young and too grief-stricken to pay much attention to financial details. My parents had assured me everything was handled, everything was secure. "I don't know," I admitted. "I trusted them to manage it until I was ready." "There's your problem," Jade said grimly. "Trust. In your family, that's a dangerous thing." We sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the city washing over us. Traffic, distant sirens, the murmur of people passing by. Above us, my graduation party continued, oblivious guests celebrating an achievement that suddenly felt meaningless in the face of this betrayal. "What do I do?" I asked finally. Jade looked at me with the kind of clear-eyed determination that had made her successful in her ruthless industry. "First, we get documentation. Every transaction, every account statement, every piece of paper related to that trust fund. Second, we figure out where the money went. And third," she paused, her jaw setting in a hard line, "we make them pay for this." I thought about returning to the party, about confronting my parents in front of all those guests. The idea was simultaneously terrifying and appealing. But I knew that approach would backfire. My parents were experts at public performance. They would deny everything, claim misunderstanding, promise to explain later in private where they could control the narrative. No, I needed a different approach. I needed evidence, strategy, and perfect timing. "Help me understand the financial part," I said to Jade. "Walk me through how this could have happened." She nodded, shifting into professional mode. "If your parents still had any legal control over the account, maybe as trustees or co-signers, they could have executed a transfer. Or if they had power of attorney for some reason. Or..." She paused, her expression darkening further. "If they forged your signature on transfer documents." "Would the bank not verify?" I asked. "Banks verify signatures. But if your parents are wealthy and established clients, if the account has a long history with the institution, if the transfer appears legitimate on paper, they might not scrutinize it closely, especially if it was done through a financial advisor who had existing authorization." I thought about Harold, my financial advisor, a man who had worked with my family for decades. He had known me since I was a child. Would he participate in something like this? Or would he simply follow instructions from my parents, assuming they had authority? "I need to call Harold," I said, reaching for my phone. Jade stopped me. "Not yet. If he's complicit, you'll tip them off that you know. Right now, the only advantage you have is that they think you're upstairs celebrating, oblivious to what just happened. Let them believe that for a little longer." She was right, of course. I had to be smart about this. I had spent my entire life watching my parents manipulate situations to their advantage. If I wanted to beat them at their own game, I needed to learn from their tactics. "So what's my move?" I asked. Jade stood, pulling me up with her. "Your move is to go back to that party, smile, accept congratulations, and act like everything is perfect. Meanwhile, I'm going to make some calls. I have friends in banking and legal who can help us trace where that money went and figure out our options. We'll meet tomorrow morning with a plan." I looked up at the building, at the windows of the conference hall where my graduation party continued without me. I thought about my parents up there, congratulating themselves on a successful deception. I thought about Olivia, wherever she had gone, participating in their scheme either willingly or under duress. And I thought about my grandmother, who had tried to protect me with that trust fund, who had wanted to ensure I would have independence and choices. She had not counted on her own son betraying that intention. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll play along. For now." Jade squeezed my shoulder. "You're stronger than they know. You're going to get through this." As I walked back toward the building entrance, I felt something shift inside me. The naive trust that had characterized my relationship with my family was gone, burned away by their betrayal. What replaced it was something harder, sharper, more dangerous. They had made a mistake by underestimating me. They thought I would be too focused on my graduation, too trusting to question, too compliant to fight back. They had no idea what I was capable of when pushed too far. I composed myself in the building's restroom before returning to the party. The mirror showed someone who looked remarkably calm, considering the storm raging inside. I reapplied lipstick, straightened my dress, and practiced smiling until it looked genuine. If I was going to pull this off, I needed to be convincing. When I stepped back into the conference hall, the party had progressed to the dancing phase. Couples swayed on the floor, while others clustered in conversation groups, their laughter rising above the jazz quartet playing in the corner. Everything looked exactly as it had before, except now I saw it all through a different lens. My mother spotted me first. She detached herself from a group of her society friends and glided over, her pearls catching the light. "There you are, darling. Where did you disappear to? Several people have been asking for you." I met her eyes, searching for any sign of guilt or nervousness. She looked back at me with nothing but polite maternal concern. She was good. I had to give her that. Years of practice had made her an expert at deception. "Just needed some air," I said, keeping my voice light. It was getting warm in here. "Well, you must speak with the Harrisons before they leave. Theodore has been asking about your plans for environmental consulting. He has some contacts who might be useful." I nodded, and allowed her to guide me toward an older couple near the bar. As we walked, I caught sight of my father across the room. He was laughing at something someone had said, his entire demeanor relaxed and celebratory. He did not look like a man who had just orchestrated the theft of his daughter's inheritance. The next hour passed in a blur of forced conversations and false enthusiasm. I spoke with my father's business associates, my mother's charity circle friends, distant relatives who only appeared at major family events. Everyone congratulated me. Everyone told me how proud I must make my parents. Everyone assumed my life was perfect. If they only knew. Olivia had not returned. Her absence would have been notable, except that she had a reputation for leaving events early. "She's an artist," my mother would say dismissively, as if that explained everything. People nodded knowingly and did not question further. Around 11 p.m., the party began winding down. Guests collected coats and said their goodbyes, promising to stay in touch and offering vague invitations for future gatherings. My father gave another short speech, thanking everyone for coming and praising me one more time for the cameras. A photographer had been hired to document the evening, capturing images that would probably appear in the society pages of local publications. I smiled for every photo, hugged every departing guest, and maintained my performance until the last person left. When the doors finally closed and only immediate family remained, I felt the mask slip slightly. My parents conferred with the catering staff and event coordinator, handling final details and payments. I watched them work together seamlessly, a team united in their goals. They had built a life on appearances, on maintaining the right image for the right people. Truth was secondary to perception. My father approached me as I gathered my belongings. "Wonderful evening, Ava. Your mother and I are so proud of you." I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how I had missed seeing this side of him before. The calculating eyes behind the warm smile, the way he measured every interaction for advantage, the complete absence of genuine emotion beneath the performance. "Thank you," I said evenly, "for everything." He seemed satisfied with that response. He patted my shoulder and moved away to speak with the venue manager. My mother joined me a moment later, her expression softer now that the public had departed. "You should get some rest, darling," she said. "You look exhausted." "I am," I agreed. That, at least, was honest. "Will you come by for brunch tomorrow? We should discuss your job search and living arrangements now that you've graduated." I thought about what Jade had said. Maintain the illusion, act normal, buy time. Sure. What time? Noon? Your father has a golf game in the morning, but he'll be back by then. I agreed and said my goodbyes. They seemed pleased with how the evening had gone. Why wouldn't they be? They had successfully robbed me while I stood in a room full of witnesses, none of whom suspected a thing. The taxi ride back to my apartment took 20 minutes through late-night Boston traffic. I lived in a small place in Brookline, an area I could afford on my previous graduate stipend and part-time work. Come July, I was supposed to start my new job with the consulting firm, and I had been planning to upgrade to a better neighborhood with my trust fund providing a security cushion. Those plans now seemed like naive fantasies. Jade texted as I was unlocking my apartment door. "Found something. Call me when you're home." I dropped my purse and kicked off my heels before calling her back. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me you're sitting down," she said. I sank onto my couch. "I'm sitting." I called a friend who works in wealth management. She's not supposed to do this, but she ran a preliminary search on accounts associated with your family. "Ava, the money from your trust fund was transferred to an account in Olivia's name." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "The account was opened 3 weeks ago, the day after your birthday. The funds were transferred the same day. There have been no withdrawals yet, but they moved my entire inheritance to my sister," I finished, my voice hollow. "It looks that way. I don't have all the details yet, but the preliminary data is clear. The trust fund that was supposed to be yours is now legally sitting in an account controlled by Olivia." I sat in silence, trying to process this information. My parents had not just stolen from me, they had given everything to my sister. Why? What had Olivia done to deserve my inheritance? Or more accurately, what had I done to warrant its removal? "There's more," Jade continued carefully. "My friend mentioned that transfers like this typically require significant documentation. Signatures, legal filings, trustee authorizations. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make this appear legitimate." "Harold," I said, "my financial advisor. He must have been involved. Probably. But he's also left a paper trail. If we can prove he acted improperly or without proper authorization, we might have grounds for legal action." I thought about legal action against my own family. The publicity, the destruction of relationships, the complete rupture of whatever fragile connections still existed. Part of me wanted to walk away, to start fresh somewhere else and never look back. But a larger part of me, the part that was growing stronger with each revelation, refused to accept defeat. They had stolen from me. They had lied to me. They had betrayed every principle of family trust and parental duty. And they had done it all while celebrating my academic achievements and pretending to be proud. I want them to pay, I said quietly. Jade's voice was firm. Then we make a plan. But Ava, you need to understand what you're getting into. If you go after them, it won't be pretty. Your parents have money, connections, and lawyers. They will fight dirty. I'm aware. And there's another possibility you need to consider, she added hesitantly. What if Olivia doesn't know what happened? What if your parents manipulated her too? I had not considered that angle. Olivia and I had grown distant over the years, but she was still my sister. Had she willingly participated in stealing my inheritance, or had our parents used her as a pawn in some larger scheme? I need to talk to her, I decided. Do you think she'll tell you the truth? Only one way to find out. I texted Olivia, keeping the message casual. Hey, wanna grab coffee tomorrow morning? Haven't seen you in a while. Her response came surprisingly quickly for midnight. Can't tomorrow? Maybe next week? It's important, I pressed. Please? A longer pause this time. Then, fine. 10 a.m. at the usual place? The usual place was a cafe near Boston Common, where we used to meet during her undergraduate years. We had shared countless coffees there, back when our relationship had been less complicated. The location felt deliberately chosen, neutral ground where memories of better times might soften whatever conversation was about to happen. I confirmed the meeting and set my phone down, then spent the next 3 hours unable to sleep. I kept replaying the evening in my mind, analyzing every detail. My father's whispered instructions, my mother's calculated approach to Olivia, my sister's quiet departure, the empty account, and the transferred funds. Every piece pointed to careful planning and deliberate execution. This had not been a spontaneous decision. They had been working toward this for weeks, maybe months. The timing around my graduation was meant to distract me, to keep me focused on celebration rather than finances. Around 3 a.m., I finally drifted into restless sleep, my dreams filled with images of locked doors and empty vaults, and family dinners where everyone smiled while hiding knives behind their backs. I woke at 8 a.m. to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and a text from Jade. Did you sleep? Barely, I responded. Good. Angry people need fuel. Grab breakfast before you meet Olivia. You need to be sharp. She was right. I showered, dressed in casual clothes, jeans and a sweater, and forced myself to eat yogurt and fruit even though my stomach protested. By 9:45, I was walking toward Boston Common, the morning air cool and carrying the scent of freshly cut grass from the park. The cafe was moderately crowded with Sunday morning regulars. I ordered a cappuccino and claimed a table near the window where I could watch the entrance. Olivia arrived exactly at 10, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders, wearing yoga pants and an oversized cardigan that made her look younger than her 22 years. She slid into the seat across from me, her expression guarded. So what's this about? I studied her face, looking for signs of guilt or discomfort. She met my gaze steadily, but her fingers played with the edge of her cardigan in a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. Where did you go last night? I asked directly. What? At my graduation party. I saw you leave suddenly. Where did you go? Her expression shifted. Surprise, then something defensive. I had another commitment. I told Mom I might need to leave early. What commitment? Why does it matter? Because, I said carefully, I think something happened last night that involves both of us. And I think you know what it is. Olivia looked away, her fingers now twisting the cardigan fabric. The cafe's ambient noise, coffee grinders, conversations, background music, filled the silence between us. Olivia, I said more gently, please, just tell me the truth. When she looked back at me, her eyes were conflicted, part guilty, part defiant, part something else I could not quite read. They said you already knew. They said it had been arranged months ago and you had agreed to it. My blood ran cold. What had been arranged? The trust fund transfer. She said it quietly, looking down at the table. Mom told me that grandmother's will had been contested, that there were tax implications, that the money needed to be restructured to protect the family assets. She said you had met with Harold and agreed to temporarily move the funds into my name to shield them from some legal issue. I sat back, processing this. Of course they had lied to her. Of course they had created a cover story that made the transfer seem legitimate and even necessary. Olivia had not stolen from me. She had been manipulated just as surely as I had been. Olivia, I said slowly, I never agreed to any transfer. I didn't even know about it until last night when I checked my account and found it empty. Mom and Dad lied to you. Her face drained of color. No, they wouldn't. Think about it, I pressed. Why would grandmother's will suddenly be contested years after her death? Why would tax issues require transferring my entire inheritance to your name? Why would any of this happen during my graduation party when I was distracted? I watched her process the information, watched the realization dawn in her eyes. She had been used. We both had been. I signed papers, she whispered. Harold had me sign documents. He said it was just to authorize the transfer, that it was all temporary, that you knew about it. When was this? 3 weeks ago, right after your birthday. Mom called and said it was urgent, that I needed to meet with Harold immediately. I didn't question it because... She stopped, her voice breaking. Because I trusted them. We sat in silence for a moment, two sisters who had been played against each other by their own parents. I felt anger rising in my chest, but it was no longer directed at Olivia. She was a victim too, manipulated by people who should have protected her. Do you still have copies of those documents? I asked. She nodded slowly. Harold gave me a full set. He said I should keep them somewhere safe. I need to see them. Can you get them? Why? What are you going to do? I leaned forward, my voice low and intense. I'm going to make them regret they ever tried this, but I need your help. Will you help me? Olivia stared at me for a long moment, conflict playing across her features. She had always been the favored child, the one who was easier, more agreeable, less challenging to my parents' authority. I had been the stubborn one, the one who questioned and pushed back. But now we were both victims of the same scheme. If I help you, she said finally, what happens to the money? It was a fair question. From her perspective, she now legally controlled an account with substantial funds, even if she had obtained it through deception. She could choose to keep it, claim ignorance, and walk away rich. The money was meant for me, I said. Grandmother set up that trust fund for my future. But I paused, considering my next words carefully. I don't want to hurt you, Olivia. You were manipulated. If we can prove what they did, I'll make sure you're protected from any legal consequences. That's not what I meant, she said quietly. I mean, do you want to keep all of it? Or would you consider splitting it? I was taken aback by the question. Why would I split it? It's mine. Because, she said, her voice gaining strength, I've watched our parents treat you differently my whole life. They've pushed you harder, expected more, criticized everything you did, and I've watched them coddle me, dismiss my interests, treat me like I'm not capable of real achievement. I hate it, Ava. I hate being the lesser daughter. Her honesty surprised me. I had always assumed Olivia enjoyed her favored status, that she reveled in the easier treatment. I had never considered that being protected might feel like being diminished. So you want the money because it makes you equal? I asked. No, she said firmly. I want to help you expose what they did because it's wrong. But after that, I want you to consider that maybe grandmother would have wanted both of us to be secure. Maybe she would have set up funds for both of us if she had lived long enough. It was a reasonable argument, though it stung to consider sharing what had been explicitly designated as mine. But Olivia had a point. Our grandmother had loved both of us. And if our parents had not interfered, perhaps she would have made provisions for Olivia as well. "Let's deal with exposing them first," I said. "Then we can figure out the rest." She nodded and pulled out her phone. "I'll get the documents. Where do you want to meet?" "Your apartment or mine?" "Mine is closer. Give me an hour." We left the cafe separately, Olivia heading toward her apartment in the North End, and me walking slowly through Boston Common, while I called Jade to update her on the conversation. She was pleased that Olivia was cooperating, but warned me not to trust her completely. "Family dynamics are complicated," Jade said. "Right now, Olivia is playing the victim, but she still has access to your money. Make sure you get those documents before she changes her mind." I arrived at Olivia's apartment building exactly 1 hour later. She lived on the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone, a space our parents had helped her secure and furnish. The apartment was decorated with her artwork, abstract paintings in bold colors, mixed media pieces that incorporated found objects, a few sketches of Boston landmarks. She had the documents spread across her dining table when I arrived. I sat down and began reading, my anger building with each page. The papers were professionally drafted, full of legal language and official stamps. They outlined a trust restructuring that appeared legitimate on the surface, but fell apart under scrutiny. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a signature on one of the documents. "This is supposed to be my signature authorizing the transfer, but I never signed this. Someone forged it." Olivia leaned in to look. "Are you sure? Maybe you signed something at Harold's office and forgot?" "I haven't been to Harold's office in over a year. And look at the date. This was supposedly signed 3 weeks ago on my birthday. I was at a restaurant with friends all day. I have pictures, receipts, witnesses. There's no way I signed this." I pulled out my phone and started photographing each page of the documents. Jade would need to see these, and probably a lawyer eventually. The more evidence I gathered, the stronger my case would become. "They really did forge your signature," Olivia said, her voice hollow. "They committed fraud." "Yes," I agreed. "They did." We spent the next hour going through every document, identifying all the places where my signature appeared, or rather where someone's attempt to replicate my signature appeared. The forgeries were good, but not perfect. My actual signature had evolved over the years, incorporating a specific flourish on the final letter that these forgeries lacked. "What do we do now?" Olivia asked. I thought about the brunch invitation for noon, less than an hour away. My parents would be expecting me to show up, smile, discuss my future plans, and remain completely unaware of what they had done. They probably thought they had gotten away with it. An idea began forming in my mind. It was risky and would require perfect timing, but if I pulled it off, the satisfaction would be immense. "Do you still have access to that account?" I asked Olivia. "The one with my trust fund?" She nodded. "Harold gave me login credentials and a debit card, though I haven't used either." "Good. Here's what we're going to do." I outlined my plan, watching Olivia's expression shift from confusion to understanding, to something like admiration. It was bold, potentially dangerous, and would require her complete cooperation. But if it worked, we would expose our parents' fraud in the most devastating way possible. "Are you sure about this?" she asked when I finished explaining. "They stole from me at my own graduation party," I said. "They looked me in the eye and pretended to be proud while they were robbing me blind. Yes, I'm sure." Olivia took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, I'm in. What do you need me to do first?" I checked the time. 11:30. The brunch was in 30 minutes, which meant my parents would be home preparing or already waiting for me to arrive. This had to be timed perfectly. First, I said. "We need to make a call to Harold." I dialed his number, putting the phone on speaker so Olivia could hear. He answered on the third ring, his voice carrying the professional warmth of someone who made his living managing other people's money. "Ava," he said. "What a lovely party last night. You must be so proud." "I am," I said, keeping my voice sweet. "Actually, I'm calling about my trust fund. I've been meaning to review the account details now that I have full control. Could you send me the latest statements?" A pause. Very brief, but noticeable. "Of course. Though you should know there were some adjustments made recently for tax purposes. Nothing to worry about, just standard estate planning." "Adjustments?" I asked innocently. "Your parents can explain the details better than I can." "Have you spoken with them about it?" "Not yet. I'm actually on my way to their place now for brunch." "Should I ask them about these adjustments?" Another pause. Longer this time. He was deciding how to play this, how much to reveal. "That would be best. I'll send over the statements after you've had a chance to discuss things with your father." "Perfect," I said brightly. "Thanks, Harold." I ended the call and looked at Olivia. "He's going to warn them. He's probably calling them right now." "Good," she said, understanding the strategy. "Let them think you're coming in blind. They'll be more confident, more likely to make mistakes." I texted my mother at 11:45 to say I was running 15 minutes late. She responded with a sunny emoji and told me not to rush. Everything was perfectly normal from their perspective. I was the obedient daughter coming to discuss my future, completely unaware that I no longer had the financial security they had promised me my entire life. Olivia and I took separate cars to our parents' house in Beacon Hill. The neighborhood dripped with old money and carefully maintained facades, literally and figuratively. My parents' townhouse was a masterpiece of historic architecture and modern luxury, every detail calculated to project success and good taste. I parked down the street and waited for Olivia to arrive. We had agreed that she would enter first, claiming she wanted to make up for leaving the party early. Her presence would seem natural and would position her perfectly for what came next. I watched her walk up the front steps and disappear inside. Then I waited 5 minutes, letting them get comfortable with her presence before approaching the door myself. My mother answered when I rang the bell, her face lighting up with maternal warmth that now seemed utterly false. "Darling, come in, come in. Your father just got back from golf. Olivia surprised us by stopping by." I entered the house that had been my childhood home, seeing it now with new eyes. The expensive furniture, the art collection, the Persian rugs. Everything had been acquired with money and status as the primary motivations. There was no warmth here, no real comfort, just the appearance of a perfect family home. My father was in the living room, still wearing his golf clothes, a whiskey in his hand despite it being barely noon. Olivia sat on the couch, her expression carefully neutral. She gave me a barely perceptible nod. Everything was in place. "Ava," my father said, gesturing to a chair, "join us. Your mother has prepared quite a spread for brunch." We moved to the dining room where the table was indeed elaborately set with a meal that looked like it had been catered rather than homemade. Smoked salmon, fresh bagels, fruit salads, pastries, everything arranged with the same attention to appearance that characterized every aspect of my parents' lives. We made small talk while filling our plates. My father discussed his golf game. My mother mentioned an upcoming fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. Olivia talked about a new art exhibition she was working on. Everyone performed their roles perfectly. "So," my father said eventually, turning his attention to me, "your mother mentioned you want to discuss your plans now that you've graduated." "Yes," I said, cutting into my smoked salmon. "I've been thinking about my financial situation, actually. With my new job starting in July, I wanted to review my assets and make sure everything is in order." I watched them carefully, My mother's hand paused for just a moment before continuing to spread cream cheese on her bagel. My father took a slow sip of his whiskey, his expression unchanging. "Very responsible," he said. "Have you spoken with Harold?" "Briefly. He mentioned some adjustments to my trust fund. Something about tax purposes?" My mother spoke up quickly. "Nothing major, darling. Just some restructuring that your father arranged. The money is still safe, still available to you. We can go over the details later if you like." "Actually," I said, setting down my fork and looking directly at her, "I'd like to go over the details now. I checked my account last night and noticed the balance was much lower than expected. In fact, it was almost empty." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. My father's eyes narrowed slightly. My mother's smile became fixed and brittle. "I'm sure there's a simple explanation," my father said. "Sometimes electronic banking shows incorrect information. Harold will sort it out." "Will he?" I asked, because I also noticed a large transfer on the day after my 25th birthday. The entire trust fund was moved to another account, one I don't control. Olivia was watching our parents now, her expression shifting from neutral to something harder. She had been prepared for this, but seeing our parents' reaction in real time was clearly affecting her. "Ava," my mother said carefully, "you're obviously confused about something. Why don't we call Harold together and get this cleared up?" "I'm not confused," I said. My voice was steady, calm, controlled. "I know exactly what happened. You transferred my inheritance to Olivia's name. You forged my signature on authorization documents. You did it during my graduation party, timing it so I would be distracted and celebrating while you were committing fraud." The word hung in the air like a grenade. My father's expression darkened. My mother looked genuinely shocked that I had discovered their scheme. "That's a very serious accusation," my father said, his voice cold. "I think you need to be very careful about what you're claiming." "I have the documents," I said. Olivia showed them to me, complete with forged signatures and fabricated justifications. I also have transaction records, account statements, and a very clear timeline of when everything happened. Olivia stood up, pulling papers from her bag and placing them on the dining table. "They lied to me too," she said to our parents. "You told me Ava had agreed to this, that it was for tax purposes, that everything was legitimate, but she never agreed. You forged her signature." My mother's carefully maintained composure began to crack. "Olivia, you don't understand. This was for the good of the family. The trust fund money was going to be wasted on what?" I interrupted. "On my future? On my independence? On having choices that didn't depend on your approval?" My father stood, his whiskey forgotten. "You have no idea what you're talking about. That money came from family assets that I built. Your grandmother had no right to tie it up in a trust that excluded me from control." There it was, the real reason. Not taxes, not legal issues, not protecting family assets. He wanted control of money that had been explicitly designated to skip over him and go directly to me. My grandmother had not trusted him with it, and he had resented that for years. "So you stole it," I said flatly. "You waited until I turned 25, until the trust was supposed to transfer to my control, and you stole it." "I reallocated family resources appropriately," he corrected, his voice tight with anger. "You've always been headstrong, ungrateful, questioning every decision we made for you. Olivia is more reasonable, more willing to understand family obligations. It made sense to give her control of those funds." "You mean it made sense to give you indirect control through her?" I said. "Because Olivia would do what you wanted with the money, while I would have used it for my own purposes." My mother tried a different approach, her voice softening into something that might have been pleading. "Ava, please try to understand. We've given you everything. The best education, opportunities, connections. We were just trying to ensure the family remained strong and unified. By stealing from me, I repeated. By lying to both your daughters. By forging legal documents. That's your definition of keeping the family strong? Olivia had been standing quietly, but now she spoke up. I want to transfer the money back to Ava. I didn't ask for this, and I don't want to be part of your scheme. My father turned on her, his expression furious. You'll do no such thing. That money is legally in your name now. If you transfer it back, there will be consequences. What consequences? I asked, stepping between him and Olivia. Are you going to threaten her the way you've been manipulating both of us? Are you going to cut her off? Disinherit her? Make her life miserable unless she obeys? He stared at me, and I saw in his eyes the cold calculation of someone who viewed his own children as assets to be managed rather than people to be loved. You have no proof of anything illegal. Those documents were properly executed with appropriate authorizations. If you try to make trouble, you'll find yourself fighting a legal battle you cannot win. Really? I pulled out my phone. Because I've already sent copies of everything to a lawyer friend of Jade's. She specializes in elder financial fraud and estate disputes. She's very interested in the forged signatures, the suspicious timing, and Harold's involvement. That stopped him. His face flushed red, anger mixing with what might have been the first hint of concern. Harold was the weak link in their scheme, a professional who had risked his license and reputation to help them. If an actual lawyer started investigating, Harold would likely cooperate to save himself. My mother tried once more to smooth things over. Let's all calm down and discuss this rationally. I'm sure we can reach an understanding that works for everyone. No, I said firmly. We can't. Because you don't want an understanding. You want compliance. You want me to accept being robbed and pretend everything is fine. You want Olivia to participate in your fraud and be grateful for the privilege. Neither of those things is going to happen. I moved toward the dining room entrance, gesturing for Olivia to follow me. We had accomplished what we came for, confronting them, making them aware that we knew the truth, letting them see that their scheme was exposed. If you walk out that door, my father said, his voice carrying the weight of ultimate authority, you're no longer part of this family. No more support, no more connections, no more safety net. You'll be on your own. I paused and looked back at him. I've always been on my own, Dad. I just didn't realize it until now. Olivia and I left together, walking out of that house and down the front steps into the afternoon sunlight. My phone was already buzzing with angry texts from both parents, but I ignored them. We had bigger moves to make. We met Jade at her apartment in Back Bay, a stylish space that reflected her success and independence. She had a friend with her, another woman named Victoria, who introduced herself as a financial crimes attorney. "Show me everything," Victoria said, settling onto Jade's couch with the intensity of someone who loved complicated legal puzzles. We spent the next 3 hours going through documents, transaction records, and account statements. Victoria took copious notes, asked detailed questions, and gradually built a picture of exactly how the fraud had been executed. "This is actually quite sophisticated," she said finally. "They used multiple layers of authorization, timed everything carefully, and had a financial professional facilitate the transfers. But the forged signatures are their downfall. If we can prove those aren't genuine, the entire structure collapses." "How do we prove it?" Olivia asked. "Forensic document analysis," Victoria explained. "We get the original documents examined by a handwriting expert. Combined with evidence that Ava was elsewhere when the signatures were supposedly made, we can establish fraud." "What about Harold?" I asked. "My financial advisor. He had to know these signatures were forged." Victoria nodded grimly. "He's potentially facing serious professional consequences. The state licensing board takes this kind of thing very seriously. If he cooperates and testifies about your father's role in orchestrating the fraud, he might negotiate a lighter punishment." Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria worked methodically to build our case. The forged signature analysis came back conclusive. The documents were fraudulent. Harold, when confronted with potential criminal charges, broke down and provided detailed testimony about how my father had pressured him to execute the transfers, promising legal protection and compensation if anything went wrong. But I did not want just a legal victory. I wanted something more personal, more immediate. I wanted my parents to face public consequences for their actions. That opportunity came through an unexpected avenue. My father's pharmaceutical company was hosting their annual investors meeting in late June, a high-profile event where he would present the company's performance and future strategy. These meetings were carefully choreographed affairs, designed to project confidence and success to shareholders. I reached out to a business journalist I had met during my thesis research, someone who had covered pharmaceutical industry ethics and been interested in my work on corporate environmental responsibility. I told her I had a story about executive fraud and family betrayal that would interest her readers. She listened to everything, reviewed the documents, and confirmed the facts independently through her own sources. Then she asked me if I was sure I wanted to go public. "This will destroy your relationship with your parents permanently," she warned. "There's no coming back from this." "There was no relationship to save," I said. "They made that clear when they chose money over integrity." The article ran 3 days before the investors' meeting. It was thorough, well-researched, and devastating. "Pharmaceutical executive defrauds own daughter," read the headline. The story outlined the entire scheme: the trust fund theft, the forged signatures, Harold's involvement, the manipulation of Olivia. The response was immediate and explosive. Social media picked up the story. Business networks covered it. Other journalists started digging into my father's company, finding additional questionable practices that he had kept hidden. The careful image he had cultivated for decades crumbled in a matter of days. The board of Thornfield Pharmaceuticals called an emergency meeting. Shareholders demanded answers. Regulatory bodies started investigating. My father tried to issue statements claiming misunderstanding and misrepresentation, but the evidence was too solid, too well documented. The investors' meeting was a disaster. I attended as a shareholder myself. I had purchased a small number of company shares specifically to gain access. I sat in the back of the conference room and watched my father try to address hundreds of angry investors who had read about his fraud. He looked diminished somehow, standing at the podium while hostile questions came from every direction. His prepared remarks about company growth and strategic initiatives were drowned out by demands for accountability. Someone moved to call for his resignation. The vote was overwhelmingly in favor. I watched him sign the papers removing him from his position as CEO, watch the security team escort him from the building, watch the empire he had built crumble because he had been too arrogant to consider the consequences of his actions. My mother faced her own reckoning. Her social circle, those carefully cultivated relationships with other wealthy women, turned cold once the fraud became public knowledge. Invitations stopped coming. Charity boards asked her to step down from leadership positions. The image she had worked so hard to maintain shattered like glass. But the most satisfying consequence came from an unexpected source. My grandmother's estate attorney, who had been traveling abroad during the initial fraud, returned and immediately filed legal action upon learning what had occurred. Grandmother had included provisions in her will, specifically preventing my father from accessing or controlling the trust fund she had established for me. His actions had violated not just legal statutes, but her explicit final wishes. The legal battle was brief, but brutal. Victoria represented me with fierce competence, while my parents hired expensive lawyers who ultimately could not overcome the evidence of fraud. The court ordered the complete return of my trust fund, plus penalties and interest. Harold lost his financial advisor license and faced potential criminal charges. My father settled out of court to avoid prosecution, but the financial cost was enormous. 3 months after my graduation party, I stood in Victoria's office as she handed me a check representing the full restoration of my trust fund, plus additional compensation for the fraud. Olivia was there too, having testified on my behalf throughout the process. "Your grandmother would be proud," Victoria said. "You fought for what was right." I looked at the check. at the number that represented years of my grandmother's careful investment and planning. She had wanted me to have choices, independence, and security. My parents had tried to take that away, but they had failed. "What will you do now?" Olivia asked. I thought about it. The consulting job was still waiting for me, but I had options now. Real options not constrained by financial desperation or family obligation. I'm going to build something of my own, I decided. Something that actually makes a difference in environmental protection. And I'm going to do it my way, without owing anyone anything. Olivia smiled. Need a communications director? I'm thinking about leaving art for something more purposeful. We left Victoria's office together, two sisters who had been manipulated and betrayed, but had emerged stronger. The summer sun was warm on our faces as we walked through Boston, talking about futures we would build on our own terms. My parents faced the full weight of their actions in the months that followed. My father never recovered his position in the pharmaceutical industry, his reputation too damaged for any company to risk association with him. He was forced to sell the Beacon Hill townhouse to cover legal fees and settlement costs, downsizing to a modest suburban home that seemed to mock everything he had worked to achieve. My mother found herself excluded from the social circles that had once defined her existence, her name now associated with scandal rather than philanthropy. They stayed together, bound by shared disgrace rather than love, each bitter about the fall from grace that their own greed had engineered. The respect they had once commanded had evaporated, replaced by whispers and avoidance wherever they went. Their carefully constructed image of the perfect family had been revealed as hollow performance, and the revelation cost them everything they had valued most. I stood on the balcony of my new apartment overlooking the Charles River, thinking about the journey from that graduation party to this moment. The revenge had been sweeter than I had imagined, not because of the money restored or the public vindication, but because I had reclaimed something more valuable than wealth. I had reclaimed my sense of self, my ability to trust my own judgment, my willingness to fight for what was right, even when it meant standing against my own family. My grandmother had given me more than a trust fund. She had given me a choice about the kind of person I would become, and I had finally, truly, made that choice my own.